Good evening. Today is June 14th, 2021, and it is 5 p.m. As a quorum of the board is in attendance, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Central Health Board of Managers. Members, the first item of business is public communication. We will receive public communication for both the Board of Managers meeting and the Budget and Finance Committee meeting before we proceed to the board's regular agenda. Members of the public who wish to make comments during the public communication must have registered with Central Health via the online form or by telephone no later than 3:30 p.m. today. Yvonne, did anyone register to make comments?
No, ma'am. No one registered for either the Board of Managers meeting or the Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you, Yvonne. Then we will now proceed to the regular agenda. Number one, the first item on the regular agenda, receive and take appropriate action to approve proposed changes to the Central Health Homestead tax exemptions for Travis County residents who are over 65 or disabled for the 2021 tax year. Jeff Knodel and Lisa Owens will be presenting.
Thank you, Chair Greenberg. Jeff Knodel, CFO. Lisa Owens is also available in the presentation. We are requesting action tonight, next slide, related to our homestead, our property tax homestead exemptions. This is something that we do on an annual basis. And what we're talking about are local property tax, optional local property tax exemptions that local taxing jurisdictions elect the amount of exemption that they want to grant their taxpayers within their jurisdiction. For Central Health, that's 3. It's a homestead, age 65 and over and disabled. And the way it works related to Central Health and most, if not all, Texas hospital districts is the hospital district may make a recommendation, but ultimately the county commissioners courts approve the amounts, just like they approve our tax rate. So our goal timing wise is to go over what the Central Health Board would want to forward to the Commissioners Court as a recommendation, have the Commissioners Court take action, and then when the appraisal district sends out property tax notices, those exemption amounts would be reflected on the tax notices. The current Central Health exemption amounts for homestead is 20% of taxable assessed value, which is the maximum amount allowed under state law. Age 65 and over is 85,500. Disabled is the same amount, 85,500. And we've had a long history where the Central Health exemption amounts have been the same amount as the counties has been, just to give it some context. Next slide. So there was a request at our previous meeting to not only look at the kind of the major overlapping taxing jurisdictions that we presented, but also to look at other municipalities within Travis County. And so there are a couple things to look at related to this slide. One, the city of Austin has made substantial changes to their homestead, their homestead percentage amount. So it's gone from, should have had 5,000. And by the way, 5,000 is the minimum amount. So 5,000 is the minimum amount. They've changed their homestead percentage from 10 to 20%. And then they've changed their over 65 and disabled from 88,000 to 113,000. So even though I believe that's been approved, just wanted to stick that out in red so you can see what the change is. And then you can see the other rates that other municipalities within Travis County have, just for information. Next slide. So this is a graph of the homesteads by value band. So we do taxable value bands. And so this shows a distribution of homesteads that are 65 years and older. And by the way, that's the majority of, you know, if you looked at a total count of homesteads, 65 and over, I think is around, if I remember right, about 68,000 or so. The disabled homestead amounts from a count wise is about 5% of that. So the majority of the homestead taxpayers that we're talking about related to these two exemptions is 65 years and older. But you'll see this is a distribution account. There's probably around 15,000 or so is the kind of the peak of the distribution. 15,000 taxpayers that have homesteads that are 65 years and older in the grand total, and you can see it slopes off the greater the value. Next slide. So the concept of trying to look at, well, what is a reasonable or rational way to look at you know, establishing what our homestead amount should be. And so the one approach that I came up with was, well, let's look at a history. Let's look at the last 5 years of median tax assessed value. And let's look at the amounts of the exemptions and look at it as a percentage, as a pro rata percentage. And so you see on this chart, the blue bars are the actual median assessed values by year, by fiscal year. And then the orange shows the exemption amounts, and so they're obviously they're both the same, over 65 and disabled. And then the gray line is the pro rata percentage by year. So you see a kind of a high point in fiscal year 2016, and then a general slope down all the way to that's actually tax year. I'm sorry, I said fiscal year. That's tax year. So fiscal year 2021, tax year 2020. Our 5-year average, looking at this ratio, is 26%, and the fiscal year 22 median taxable assessed value, or the tax year 2021, depending on how you want to look at it, taxable value, is a little over $383,000. So significant growth from tax year 2020 to tax year 2021, which again is equivalent to fiscal year 2021 into 2022. Next slide. So staff's recommendation is that we maintain the homestead exemption at 20%, that we increase our 65 and over and disabled exemption amounts from $85,500 to $100,000. And that's taking into account the methodology that I just described, which is taking a 5-year average of the median homestead value and applying that to the new the new median value to get to $100,000. So it's a 26% of $383,000. So the impact of the increase is about $1.1 million. And there's been a change in how these homestead values impact the taxing jurisdictions. So in the past, historically, any increase in the exemption amounts would have resulted in lost revenue. So in other words, those amounts are taken from the taxable assessed value roll, and the taxing jurisdiction will take the impact or the hit on that. That's changed recently, and the way it works now is any increase in exemption amounts would result in a reallocation, or you put it back into the certified roll or the roll of the taxable roll amount, and then you reallocate it across all the other taxpayers. So instead of there being a taxing jurisdiction impact, it's simply reallocated amongst all the other taxpayers, including commercial, industrial, non-homesteads, et cetera, et cetera. We've talked some with Travis County staff. They also, we haven't, usually what happens is we're usually behind them and they usually have an action, and then we look at their action, what they did, and then we pass it on to the board. Timing didn't work out well for us this year, so we're out a little bit ahead, but we've been talking to them, and their staff both supports us making a recommendation, but they're also strongly considering making a $100,000 recommendation to the Travis County Commissioner Court related to the county's exemption amounts. There's still discussion to be had there, and the court ultimately sets the amount, but it's something that they were looking at and felt that the court would strongly consider an increase. And then again, just as a reminder, the central health exemption amounts do require Travis County Commissioner's Court approval. Next slide. So
Jeff, Manager Valadez, is your screen operating now? I can't, okay, you're on mute too, Manager Valadez, but it appears that Manager Valadez's screen is not operating. So have you been able to see the slides, Manager Valadez?
The only slide I have seen is Travis County Municipalities Local Property Tax Exemption, which was the first screen.
Okay, so it appears that you were frozen. Let's see if somebody can just email you the slides that you missed, okay? Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe these were in the packet also. So
no,
I think
the additional screens, I only got 5 sheets, and that's it.
Okay, we'll see if somebody can send you what you need.
Okay. So next steps, again, just reiterating, we're here tonight to take action, to make a recommendation to the Travis County Commissioners Court. They will consider our request and ultimately approve our homestead exemption amounts before the end of June. I think they have a meeting at the end of June that they would take this item up. And then importantly, it would time out appropriately, again, as I mentioned, sorry, my screen's doing a bunch of things here. It would time out good where our exemption amounts would be reflected on the tax notices that are sent out by the Travis Central Appraisal District. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that board members may have regarding this item.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions at this time? Manager Valadez,
I'd like to go ahead and make the motion.
go ahead, please.
Please, I don't have the motion in front of me, so I'm assuming that it's going to be to accept whatever motion has been sent to us
Hold on.
to adopting the recommended tax exemptions as reported by.
Manager Valadez, why don't we let Manager Bell make it and you second it since
Thank
he
you,
has
Dr.
the motion? Okay. You're on mute, Manager Bell.
There we go. All right. I move that the board recommendation that the Travis County Commissioners Court adopt the proposed changes to the Central Health Homestead tax exemptions for Travis County residents who are over 65 or disabled for the 2021 tax year as recommended by staff.
Okay, we have a motion by Manager Bell and Manager Valadez has a second by Manager Valadez. Any discussion? Manager
Manager
Jones?
Jones.
Yeah, yes, this is a question for Mr. Duncan. As has been my practice in the past, I usually abstain on this vote because there is a benefit should the county commissioners agree to that as one who's in that. Is that necessary, or is that acceptable to be able to?
I really don't think that's necessary for you to recuse yourself. All of the board members that are over 65 would have to recuse themselves or disabled. There are actually some court cases where some judges did not recuse themselves from cases where, especially tax cases, where the public writ large benefits from a tax action. So I do not believe that is necessary. No, sir.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Manager Valadez?
I just have just a real quick question, and it could be off topic, but I just didn't know whether or not veterans are included in this if they're not disabled.
So there are a whole lot of disabled and veterans state exemptions. This is purely disabled and over 65. I think I believe Manager Valdez, there's another state exemption class that the state has related to disabled veterans.
There is, Manager Valdez, and I can send you the information on that, but that is not included in this.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstaining? Manager Valdez? Any abstaining? All right. Thank you, members. The motion passes. Yes, Manager Valdez.
I just have a quick question, and I'd like for David to ask for clarification to see if that's something that we should be doing or not be doing with respect to veterans that are not disabled.
It's a statutory exemption, Manager Valdez. It's not one that is. Okay. These are set at a level depending on the jurisdiction.
No,
so
I understand that.
It just doesn't require any action.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, members, we will now move to item number 2 on our agenda. Receive and take appropriate action on the Central Health capital budget for the headquarters consolidation and clinical space project, and receive an update on the financing plan, including the timeline for the issuance of certificates of obligation. Jeff Knodel and Lisa Owens will be presenting. Manager Valdez, you have a question? You're on mute, Manager Valdez.
Am I muted or unmuted?
You're good now. You're good
Okay.
now.
I know I saw the notice of hearing for today. Was that with respect to this action?
Mr. Duncan?
Only very peripherally. The part about update on the financing plan and the timeline for issuance, that hearing was related to the tax exempt status of $15,155,000 of the total CO package of a little over $80 million. And all
Right.
that hearing was for is it's a requirement of federal tax law that if the buyer of those bonds doesn't want to pay tax on it, you have to have a public hearing and explain to the public and allow the public to comment on whether those bonds should be tax exempt or COs should be tax exempt or not. It's a very, very arcane process, I have to say.
Yes. Thank you.
I believe that, but then my subsequent question is, follow up to that, is whether or not this notice for any of the hearings that we have, should it not be 3 business days, not 3 days? Because I was looking at the, when
Manager Valdez, let's let Mr. Duncan answer. Mr.
well, I
Duncan?
was just going to expand on my question. My question was, I didn't get notice about this hearing until 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. And when I looked at the notice of hearing, what was sent to us as a copy of the notice did not have a date on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duncan.
The notice, so we have outside counsel on this, and this is all they do. They do public debt. It's Warwick Harrington, Jerry Kyle, and the requirements for this again are very, very narrow and very kind of arcane federal tax law. The notice was published on the Travis County website, which is the requirement, not our website. We actually linked to it from our website, and it was published for a full 7 days. It was up for 7 days from last Monday morning early until the hearing today. So it was up for a full 7 days and remained at the top of they have a sort of a news side. And I checked it this morning and it was still the very first thing on that list. So it's been available to the public for 7 days, which is the statutory requirement.
Yes, Manager Valdez.
Yes, this is going to be my last comment.
Thank you.
I think it's kind of non-transparent for us to put it on the Travis County website for Central Health public hearing and not put it on our own public website.
Hold on a minute, Mr. Duncan. I know that these are very specific requirements of the IRS, and I know that Jeff and Lisa will elaborate, but didn't you say that it was linked to our website?
Correct. Our website had a link to the notice on the county website, and by law, it had to be on the county website. That was the only place it could be.
We didn't have a choice. These are very specific IRS.
No, I understand that, but I don't believe that. I would like an opinion on that because I understand that it needs to be on the Travis County website because that's the taxing jurisdiction that has to oversee our budget approval. But in order for us to be transparent and I guess more informative to our public, we should have it on our website also.
It is. It's at the top of our homepage.
Let me finish, please. I don't believe that just to go to a link, I didn't see it, so I'll have to look. But in the future, I actually would like for us to be more open, more transparent, more informative. And whenever we do this again, because I'm sure we're going to do it again, that we just post it. And we also post the link. Okay.
Valdez, we're gonna move on with this item.
I understand.
We want to be as transparent as possible. We will do everything possible within the confines of the law. But my understanding is that it is actually at the top of our homepage. So let's take a look at that. All right, let's proceed, please.
I'll go look.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this item, Jeff Knodel again, this item relates to our Hancock headquarters consolidation and clinical expansion. It's a capital project budget request that we're requesting action on this evening. Next slide. So the request of approval relates to the acquisition and renovation of the former Sears building located in Hancock Center, and also includes the purchase of the existing community care Hancock Clinic building on the same site. As it relates to both buildings, we anticipate 90,000 square feet of administrative space and about 106,000 square feet of clinical space. But I'm going to pause for a second and just say that's based on existing usage, space utilization that we currently have. We have a lot of planning to incorporate in this project. There are a lot of steps that we'll need to go through, both on the design side and the input side. We're requesting, and I probably should have started out this way, we're requesting approval of the budget based on estimates that we have to complete the structure, the renovation. But there are a lot of areas to be worked through throughout the project, related to both the utilization of the space and, more importantly, the services that would be provided. In addition to that, board members, you may recall a few months ago, you also approved budgets for 3 clinics in Eastern Travis County. And those clinics continue to be the priority of Central Health. This clinic is moving in, or this project is moving in tandem, but the clinical construction of those facilities will continue to be Central Health's priority. So I just wanted to make it clear that even though we're proposing and requesting approval of this budget, there's still both a lot of work to be done, and from a priority standpoint, we're prioritizing the immediate build out of clinical space that you, the board has approved. And so just to get back to the slide, financial highlights related to this capital project include transitioning from paying lease costs to ownership, which will result in substantial long-term savings. And I think we've gone over that in previous board meetings. There's also that rent versus owning perspective. If you own a real estate asset, at least historically, in Travis County, those assets have appreciated substantially. So you would ask yourself, over the term of the bond issue, which we're proposing to be 20-year bonds, that after 20 years, once the bonds are paid off, you have an asset in hand that has more than likely appreciated from the initial cost over that long period of time, rather than continue to lease year over year. And then, as I mentioned, lastly, we're financing this through the issuance of 20-year certificates of obligation. To your question, board member Valdez, the TEF for the hearing requirement was based on the $15 million issue related to the tax exempt amount. The rest of the portion and the portion for the Hancock capital project would be taxable certificates of obligation.
And Jeff, I just wanted members and the public to note that I have looked at the Central Health landing page right now. And at the very top, it says notice of public hearing and notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation. And then under that, notice of public hearing, a link, and notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation. It's the banner at the very top of our homepage right now. So I did want members and the public to be aware of that.
Thank you, Chair Greenberg. Thank you for clarifying that. So next slide. So this is a map of Hancock Center. Sorry, I don't have color coding capabilities in PDF, so bear with me. You'll see what looks like three large buildings kind of on the top of the map. The Sears building is the furthest building on the right. And then you see to the right of that, at the upper right-hand corner, is the community care, existing community care Hancock Clinic. And then you see next door is HEB, and then to the left of that are some existing retail spaces. And you'll see parking for the facility. We'll have parking on the north side. On the right-hand side is the east side, which would be IH-35, and then the frontage piece, which would be south of the building. Next slide. So current pictures of Hancock as it looks today, just for reference. It's a very large building. It looks larger. It looks even larger every time I go. So the footprint of it, it actually is 3 levels. So there's 2 levels that you see, and then there's an actual underground or basement level for the building also. Next slide. So this is what it currently looks like inside. So it's been more or less stripped. Inside, you see just basic floors, basic walls, basic mechanical, plumbing, electrical. And I think the next slide shows that also. So it's pretty barren inside, which is good. That actually has saves us some cost related to the renovation. Next slide. So these are exterior elevations, potential exterior elevations that were done for the building. We Central Health did not engage this, but the reason I wanted to show it is just to show that the building might look a lot different than the previous pictures I just showed. So this in no way is any kind of commitment on this is what the building may look like. It was some previous work that had been done that was publicly released related to the elevations of the building. So I think that's the next couple of slides. So this is another slide, and then you see this is the southern portion of the building. So you're really going from I think the most notable piece to me is going from concrete walls to cutouts where there's a lot more glass in the building, allowing a lot more natural light to come into the building. Next slide. So this is our proposed capital budget. The total budget amount is $62,586,000. We recently executed our purchase agreement that you see under acquisition and regulatory related around that. You also see the professional services and other budget items. The really majority of the budget is the construction, which is the renovation of the facility. And then we're always, cognizant that, we live in Austin, Texas, which is a fast growing area where real estate is continues to be more expensive. And we know based on some of the recent bids we've received on some other capital projects that construction costs are going up. So we have a contingency in our capital budget. You see the amount, it's almost $6 million. That represents about 18% of our construction budget. So overall, as it relates to the total space and the total cost. We're estimating our project cost to be approximately $320 per square foot. But again, there are a lot of variables related to both exterior construction cost, what we ultimately put in the building, and probably more importantly, the timing of moving quickly to begin the project. Next slide. So this shows a project timeline. You see a couple of areas that have been accomplished, that have been highlighted. We're targeting, they're kind of in the upper mid portion of the grid, the purchase transaction. We have that on the timeline to complete and execute by July 15th, which is right around the corner. We're currently in a due diligence period in hope to complete the transaction. And then you see a lot of construction timelines to an ultimate completion of March of 2024. Next slide. So this is a slide that shows as it relates to the acquisition and funding status of the project. Central Health Board and the Travis County Commissioners Court approved Central Health executing a real estate purchase. Also the approval to issue the contractual obligations has been approved. And then recently, very recently, we submitted a lot of financial information to Moody's for a bond rating, and recently were assigned a rating of AA2, which is one of the higher ratings of any hospital district in Texas. It's not the highest rating, but it's one of the highest ratings, and we're overall pleased with that rating.
Yes, I think so, Jeff. Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, to get a AAA in this industry would be, I think, virtually impossible. So the AA2 is, we should be very pleased with that.
Yeah, the highest rated district is AA1, and there's only one district. So this is very,
right.
And Moody's is new to us. So very happy with the rating. And again, the better the rating, the better the interest rate cost to borrow at. So this was a real critical step for us to go through so that we're able to have potential purchasers gauge our credit risk. So we're at now the contract execution. We're here tonight for the capital budget approval. Ultimately, we expect to complete the acquisition. And then let me pause for just a second. We are approving, we had initially scheduled this meeting to be a special call meeting related around the sale, approving the sale of the certificates of obligation. We had a really aggressive timeline, and it just did not work out for us in that regard. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to move the sale of the certificates to a date that we have some certainty that we're able to bring it forward to both the Board of Managers and the Travis County Commissioners Court. And so we are setting that date for Central Health to be August 9th. And then we would go, upon approval of the sale of the COs, we would go to the Commissioners Court the next day, which would be Tuesday, August 10th, to request approval from the Commissioners Court related to the sale of the certificates of obligation. So I just wanted to point out that, we initially had a date of June 14th, and that's been pushed back, postponed to August 9th, related to the specific transaction of selling the certificates of obligation. So next slide. So next slide is really just the action item, which staff is requesting approval of the Hancock capital project budget in the amount mentioned, $62,586,000. We'll be happy to answer any questions that the Board of Managers may have regarding this capital project.
Managers, do you have any questions? I see
Manager Saitiff and Manager Jones.
I see Manager Saitiff and then Manager Jones. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I have a quick question in terms of the design. Is there any, I'm not sure if you mentioned this in the past or not, in terms of walkability for staff. Is there a place that they can take a brisk walk during office hours? I'm just wondering, because that would be giving the proximity where it's located, there's not a lot of, it's not safe to walk. So in just terms of, do we have anything in plans for that site for staff to walk if they desired to take a brisk walk or so?
So
part of the plan?
So I think I would answer that a couple of different ways. One is we have not done any design work at all related to the project. So this would be good input. The second thing I would just add is the campus itself is pretty large. Even walking around just the building itself, and there will be a breezeway in between our building and the Sears building, the other building. So both that or the actual Hancock Center in itself, I believe, is around 34 acres. So there's a lot of, I don't know, sometimes mall walking or just walking around. And then in addition to that, there's Hancock, the Hancock Golf Course, which is kind of catty corner. I think it's been a long time since I've been out there. I think there were some walking trails kind of on the edge of it.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can't walk in the golf holes as long as it's people are playing golf. But I think there are potentially some opportunities for that type of
Okay,
activity.
great. So during that period of time, I'll just want to make sure my input is added in the design. I see Ms. McDonald's here, so thank you.
Stephanie, did you want to add anything? Stephanie McDonald? No. But thank you for the question. And it is important for everyone to understand that we're not at the design phase yet, that as Jeff said, the photos that we were showed are conceptual and had been done by another party, but they do give us some insight into how this could be transformed. Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Manager Jones, I think you had a question, correct?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick ones, and hopefully you can answer them. The first one will be under this timeline, we're looking at the June of 2024 is sort of the timeline for completion of the construction. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that's completion of the construction and the certificate of occupancy and kind of the availability of move-in. Now there may be some phasing, and Stephen could probably answer some of that. There might be some potential as entities come off lease. There might be some ways we can phase move-ins, but I believe at a minimum, the certificate of occupancy has to exist before anyone can actually move in.
Okay, thanks very much. And that answers sort of part of the second question. With the construction of this, we are pulling into this location several of our locations with community care and others, and that's correct, is that?
It's administrative consolidation. So we're looking at a number of facilities that we lease that would move in. We lease some space at Chancellor for our joint IT. There's a lot of atrium space that's rented. Sendero leases their space, and then also Community Care, their administrative headquarters. They currently lease that space also.
And what will we do with the current space that we're in now once we've moved the administrative offices over?
We have not made any plans for that, and nor have we reflected that in any analysis or savings. So that's a great question.
Yes, thank you. That at this point is to be determined, but I think it's important for everyone to recall, as Mr. Knodel said, that the robust financial analyses that were presented to us, in fact, did not include that, but it did include savings from consolidating other spaces that we currently are renting around town.
I'd be interested in, when we're able to get those savings, how much that would be. Just one other quick question. By the way, I understand that used to be years ago, before I got to Austin, an HEB. So perhaps HEB would be interested in buying it back.
I am not advised, Manager Jones.
Just a thought. The last question related to,
yes,
related to the renovation of the BRAC and funding from that. Will some of that go towards this construction? Some of the revenues that we're getting from that, or is that too early to anticipate?
So let me answer that. So we are funding this project through certificates of obligation.
Oh, that's right. You did say that.
Construction would be through our debt issuance. And if I could go back to your former question, Board Member Jones, sorry, I'm remembering this offhand, so I might be a little off, but I think we projected 20-year savings at about $17.5 million. And then we did a 30-year analysis. And remember,
but Jeff, that was without including our current location, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Clear.
Again, fairly conservative, I think.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so just kind of the lease versus buy option. 20 years was about $17.5 million. And then we looked at 30 years because, you know, we would expect the building to have at least 30 years of life, if not more. But we looked at 30 years, and remember, the debt would be paid off after 20 years. So after 30 years, there were over $100 million of savings. And it's savings both on the administrative consolidation, and remember, there's a clinical space here also. And so part of the analysis took into consideration going out and leasing additional clinical space that we would hope to locate at this facility in lieu of some of that space.
Right.
Okay, thanks very much. That's very helpful and very informative.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Manager Jones. Any other questions? Manager Valdez. You're on mute, Manager Valdez.
Okay, so we're now in the highest amount of construction costs, the highest amount of labor costs. We've got a future that we know is just going to be, whether I truly believe we're going to have greater needs unless something drastic changes in the way healthcare is delivered, not only in our county, but in the state. And so taking all of that into consideration, and thank you, Shannon, for asking that question about the building, because I had assumed the sale of our current location was going to be somehow tied to this. Otherwise, I couldn't see why would we be holding on to it when we're talking.
Manager Valdez, I think it's just undetermined at this point. We were being very conservative on our analyses of the lease versus purchase versus buy, you know, and so we did not include it at this point. It's just undetermined.
Okay, well, I think that's something we need to determine quickly, as our tax dollars are going to end up going to the construction of the Hancock Center. And I didn't understand, maybe,
The Hancock
might-
Center, just to make clear to everyone, the Hancock Center is being constructed using certificates of obligation, and that is a separate portion of our tax rate from our property tax rate. Just wanted that to be clear to anybody who's listening.
no, I was talking about the actual building. I didn't hear where the administrative offices were going to be, or were they going to be in the separate portion, or are they going to be in the actual Sears complex?
So there's still a lot of
My
design.
computer is acting up, so
Right.
So
I'm
we-
missing out a lot.
So the administrative offices will be within the Sears building. That's about the most I can tell you right now.
Yes,
And we're not going to use, and we're not going to construct anything on the site where community care is right now. That's going to be just parking.
We would continue using that facility
for
and
community care.
then determine how the use, we will own that building. It's about a 6,000 square foot clinic building currently. We would determine the best use of it moving forward.
Yes, so just so the public understands, that building is part of our purchase. It's included.
Right. But we wouldn't be, we would not own the title until after 20 years, correct?
Technically, I think we own the title. We're just pledging tax
We're
revenues.
just paying off the debt.
We would not have paid off the debt for at least 20 years.
The debt is 20-year debt, but it's like when you finance your car, you own it, you have the title.
No, I know. Yeah, I know. I've owned several cars, but as far as I'm concerned, when I'm still paying on it, it's not mine. It's not mine until it's paid off. And
It's
I'm not
not ours. We're just choosing a financing technique to amortize the costs and the benefits so that current taxpayers aren't paying the full benefits out of cash when in fact this is an asset that people will be using for 30 years.
That's right.
So it could be it could be what is it? The D word.
Depreciating.
Depreciated, yes. Okay.
And
Thank
that would be from an accounting standpoint, yes.
And so since we did not offer the public an opportunity to come provide testimony on the certificates of obligation for the Hancock Center, and we're going to take action. So that's
Actually,
Mr. Giesland?
if I may, we did offer an opportunity, and it was here at Cesar Chavez today per the published notice that is on the webpage. And if you'll allow me to share screen real
Please
quickly.
do, thank you.
This is what Chair Greenberg and Jeff and others were referencing earlier. This is the landing page on our website. You can see here notice, and this is up top, notice of public hearing and notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation.
thank you.
Here's the notice of public hearing, and here in bright yellow is the notice of intent to issue certificates of obligation.
Thank you for that. What I was referring to was what I received in an email, and that was the notice of hearing. And in that, if you can put that sheet up, that notice of hearing, I looked again before I got on this meeting, and it did not, it said in the last section of it, I think it said something like, this is down to the bottom. I did not see where it was including the Hancock Center certificates of obligation. What I saw was something about how this is part of a plan. If can somebody look at that real quick? It was
Yeah.
part of the plan. Because what we were receiving testimony in was
Okay, let's let Jeff address this. Jeff?
Yeah, let me address. So the hearing today related to the tax exempt portion of the issuance,
that's
which
right.
is the Hornsby Bend and the Del Valley clinics. And so there are different rules for tax exempt certificates of obligation issues. And one of the requirements is what's called the TEFRA hearing, the hearing that you're referring to. So it was exclusively regarding the two clinics that I mentioned. Again, they're tax exempt issuances and, related to the use of the building. The tax exempt issue offers a better opportunity for us to have a lower interest rate And so that's why we have kind of a dual issuance. We have on the clinic side, they qualify for tax exempt issuance. And so we're moving forward under that guise. And this was a required hearing exclusively for the Hornsby Bend and Del Valley clinics only.
Right.
Not,
So
not
my question is specific. Was there a hearing, a public hearing held about the issuance of certificates of obligation for the purpose of the project located at Hancock Center?
There will actually be two, actually three in the end.
That's
We
not
held-
right, David. Excuse me. My question is specifically for this project and today's public hearing. Because if we're asked to take action to push this and approve it, that means that if you schedule 1, 2, 10, I don't care how many public hearings you have, it is not going to be prior to, it's not going to be of impact to this particular vote. This vote is going to make it, that's it, it's finite. So you can have public hearings to talk about design. You can have public hearings to talk about whether we liked it or not. In Spanish, we would say ya después de atole. That means after the fact, you know, after the soup is made. So that's what I'm wanting clarification. I just want somebody to say yes or no. Did we have a public hearing today on the certificates of obligation that we are going to be talking about with respect to the Hancock Capital Project?
No,
Manager Valdez, this hearing is
Yes, no.
public.
Who said no?
This hearing is public.
well, I
David?
did, but your specific question, clearly the answer is no. The hearing today, as Jeff said, was a
Thank
very narrow, specific federal tax required hearing. It wasn't about Hancock.
I understand that.
Thank you. I think we've had a response. Mr. Giesland, did you have
Thank
something
you.
you wanted to add?
Yes, this meeting right here, where we're discussing the certificates of obligation with the board, and that was duly noted in the agenda, which was published, as with all board meetings, is a public meeting. And the recording of which, I mean, will obviously be available. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that prior even to this meeting, there was discussion with the board about issuing certificates of obligation, again, in an open meeting.
Thank you.
And what we're asking for today in this last point is to approve the capital budgets, because before we can do certificates of obligation, we just need the budget approved. There's obviously going to be ample opportunities for additional public input and hearings. And as Mr. Duncan was explaining, even with the certificates of obligation issuance having to come back to the Travis County Commissioners Court.
Correct. What we're doing today is approving the capital budget.
I appreciate that.
As Mr. Knodel noted, the sale had to be moved to August, and we will have a meeting August 9th with, if there's approval, going to Commissioners Court August 10th. So this is the capital budget that the motion is regarding.
I greatly appreciate the splitting of hairs, but I do not appreciate us not having had an opportunity for the public to state something in the form of a public hearing. That's all. And for future reference and for future actions, I'd like for us as board members and staff to consider this, please. You don't know how many times I have voted against some things that have been brought to us, and without the ability of us even knowing what the details are. And I don't want us to continue that bad habit. And
Thank you.
getting this straight, I just wanted honesty and truth and clarification. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. And I appreciate staff, but I'm just wanting to.
I want to say that staff was very specific about this being, in fact, specifically to meet the IRS requirements. Tax exempt bonds, Manager Valadez, and we can certainly look into your comments, but our goal is to be as transparent as possible. That's why we have discussed this excuse me, that's why we have discussed this at several meetings that were open meetings with public communication, and
not a public hearing
to do that and to be as transparent as possible, and take your comments under advisement with legal counsel. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Because if we had been open, then in that notice of hearing, we would have said, we will also accept comments regarding the Hancock Capital Project. Thank you. That's it.
Manager Valdez, we couldn't do that. That could only be for
I hear you. I hear you.
for the tax exempt portion. These are IRS requirements, but we will take your comments under advisement with
I
legal
appreciate
counsel.
that.
We
Thank you very
strive to be as transparent as possible at all times, so we
Thank you,
appreciate.
Sherry.
your
Thank you,
comment.
Sherry. I appreciate it.
Any other comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion? Manager Bell.
I move that the board approve the Central Health Capital Project budget for the headquarters consolidation and clinical space project as presented by staff.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? Manager Jones? That was a second? Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Raising your hand. Okay. Any opposed, the same sign? Note Manager Valdez in opposition, and any abstaining. Thank you, managers. The motion passes, and thank you to staff and managers and others for that very thorough discussion. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that concludes our special call meeting. We have just concluded with item number 2. So at this time, I am ready to accept a motion for adjournment.
I move adjournment.
Okay, I see a motion by Manager Bell and a second by Manager Jones. There may have been others. I'm just looking at the squares as they appear. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstaining? Thank you, managers. We are adjourned, and I will let us move on to the next meeting that will continue on this. Is that correct?